Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for a brand new Battlefront 2 Hero Guide. And if you somehow clicked on this video without reading the title or seeing the thumbnail, today we'll be covering none other than Leia, who just received a complete rework that has radically changed the way Leia plays. The last time we covered Leia on this series was well over 2 years ago in November of 2017. In fact, the original Leia Hero Guide was my 10th ever video on this channel. That is how long it's been, and needless to say that guide is completely outdated at this point. Today we'll be fixing that and giving my Leia guide a much needed refresh and covering everything you could possibly need to know, from her stats to her best star cards to the most efficient strategy to help you guys be the best you possibly can be on the battlefront. It has been a very long time since I've done these hero guides in any sort of consistent way. I've just kind of been doing them when I felt like it and very occasionally with no real schedule. That said, I've been thinking about making the series a more regular fixture on the channel again. Of the 22 heroes in Battlefront 2, 17 of them haven't been updated in over a year, and 10 of them, that's right, 10 of them, haven't been updated in 2 years, and that includes heroes I now consider to be some of my favorites, like Han Solo and Boba Fett. Anyway, making the series a constant on the channel again is just something I've considered. Because I like to make these guides the best they can possibly be, they aren't something I could pump out like multiple times a week or anything, but the idea I've had is to release a new hero guide every other Tuesday until everyone has been updated. If that's something you guys would be interested in seeing, let me know by leaving a thumbs up on this guide, and I'll go from there depending on the level of interest. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's just jump directly into the basics of Leia, starting out with her health, where she is completely average, at least before you consider her abilities and star cards. She has 650 health and can regenerate 200 of that HP after taking damage. As mentioned, this is pretty much the standard for blaster heroes, although Leia does have a couple of star cards and an ability that can make her feel like she has a bit more health than she actually does. With that said, Leia's health is pretty much the only thing that even kind of resembles average these days, because she has been buffed in a bunch of major ways, and we are now moving on to Leia's primary weapon, her Defender pistol, which is where we are already starting to see what makes Leia one of the best blaster heroes these days. Her pistol fires a quick 2-round burst that deals 80 damage per burst, meaning even without headshots you'll be killing most infantry in just 2 bursts, and if you manage to land both headshots in a single burst, you can kill all infantry other than heavies in a single burst, although that is easier said than done on a moving target. Just for reference, the headshot multiplier in this game is 1.9, and that applies to just about every weapon in Battlefront 2, so her pistol will deal 152 damage per burst to the head. Leia's pistol also has a secondary firing mode that sends out an explosive shot that will track on enemies at long range, dealing 145 damage, so without the proper upgrades it won't be one-shotting anyone. Even without upgrades, it is still very good when the situation arises. It tracks on enemies stronger than any other secondary fire in the entire game, and on maps like Crate and Geonosis, you really don't have to do anything other than just aim in the general direction of players and you'll be scoring effortless kills. It's kind of, well, I won't get into it right now. It's also capable of damaging blocking enemies, although because her secondary fire has a 1.5 second charge up time and a half-second cooldown between shots, this is something that is only occasionally viable, as any semi-competent lightsaber villain isn't just going to stand there and watch you slowly blast them to death. We'll need to discuss her secondary fire a bit more later in the video, as one of her star cards makes a huge difference in how strong it can be, but before we do that, we need to go over Leia's abilities, all 3 of which were recently changed in a major way. We'll start out with her squad shield, which up until recently was one of the most underwhelming abilities in all of Battlefront 2, but DICE recently improved the ability in a major way. I already said that, but I'm gonna say it again because they changed this so drastically. As far as being a shield goes, well, it works how you'd expect. You throw it down and you're protected from most incoming damage, with a few exceptions that can cut through your defenses. What makes Leia's shield stand out from the officer squad shield is its ability to heal Leia and all of her allies. It heals pretty slowly, just 5 HP per second, but it more than makes up for that slow healing, as Leia's squad shield is capable of healing herself and all friendly heroes to full health, which is something that very few things can do in Battlefront 2. Even if Leia or any other light side hero is down to just a couple hundred health, they can step into the cover of the squad shield and begin healing back to full. Now, that sounds great, and it is, but it is absolutely not something you can rely on all the time. Just for reference, if Leia's health is taken down to the point where she's only able to regenerate, say, 201 HP, which is the lowest amount possible before she would be dead, it would take her a full 90 seconds of being under the cover of her shield to get her health back, and that is assuming you are able to run away from the fight just to regenerate your health in complete peace. I will say this, you should do what you need to do, but make sure you are helping your team in the process. In HVV in particular, do not abandon your team and try to hide for 2 minutes just to get your health back. Stick with your team, try to heal them when there's a break in the action, but don't abandon your objective regardless of the mode just to get back to full health. Stay in the fight when you can because heroes are important on both sides, and if you spend half the match just running away from the task at hand to heal and not actively getting kills or locking down an objective, you will really be crippling your team. Leia is such a strong presence on an objective, and running away from it multiple minutes of in-game time is just going to throw the match for you and your team. The shield can also very much work against you at times. Palpatine can fire his lightning directly through it, and while the idea of trying to fight a lightsaber hero under the bubble while regenerating a bit of extra health may sound appealing, most of the time it will just obscure your vision and work against you. Taking on lightsaber heroes is all about trying to create as much distance as you can to keep them vulnerable, and I can guarantee hiding under your shield in a 1v1 against a saber hero is only going to work against you most of the time. Her shield has an active deployment time of 30 seconds, and the ability recharges every 20 seconds, meaning unless your shield is completely destroyed, you will be able to plant a new one before the previous shield expires. Her shield has 3000 health, so unless you're dealing with ion-based weapons which do indeed shred through shields, it is pretty unlikely your shield will ever be taken down by regular blasters. Let's move on from the squad shield and talk about Leia's brand new ability, her thermal detonators. She has 3 that must be thrown out one at a time, each dealing 250 damage at the center of their explosion radius. Her detonators have just a 13-second cooldown, which is extremely quick for an ability this powerful, although the ability won't begin cooling down until all 3 detonators have been thrown, which is a little annoying in my opinion. If you use 1 or 2 and there are no nearby enemies, I would recommend just trying to remember to get rid of the rest and start that cooldown back to 3 charges, as the cooldown is very quick once you've run out. 13 seconds is pretty reasonable. Like any explosive in Battlefront 2, the detonators deal less damage the further away from the base of the radius, so you likely won't be dealing the max damage most of the time. But with that said, her grenades are still excellent for clearing out choke points. In a 1v1, they are not quite as consistently useful, as with a nearly full second delay after hitting the ground before they will detonate, any enemy paying attention to you will have more than enough time to move away from the center of the radius. If I can, I often try to throw the detonator in front of me as I'm being chased, in the hopes that my pursuer will accidentally run right over one of them, which usually works out pretty well. I definitely could see the detonators seeing a few small tweaks to improve them in future updates. Many have requested that the detonators can cool down one by one instead of requiring all 3 to be thrown, and they also currently bug out quite often. You'll often throw down just 1, and then the entire ability will go into cooldown before you even get a chance to use a second or third grenade, which is very annoying when it happens. For everyone watching this video not during the week of upload, and these videos tend to get consistent views for months, I will definitely place a pinned comment with any notable changes to Leia from future patches so this guide stays up to date. Finally, we have the ability that really defines Leia these days, and that is her E11. As the game stands right now, Leia's E11 might be the single best blaster hero ability in all of Battlefront 2, at least in terms of killing potential. There are a few blaster heroes I'd rank ahead of Leia as a whole, but in terms of which blaster hero ability is pretty much guaranteed to score me at least a few kills or to deal a boatload of damage to an enemy hero, Leia's E11 takes the cake. The blaster deals 36 damage to the body, and with the normal 1.9 headshot multiplier, goes up to 68 damage per headshot, which is ludicrously high considering the E11's rate of fire. The blaster also has a very modest damage drop-off, and even at maximum ranges will only drop off by about half, dealing about 36 damage per headshot as far out as you can land your shots, which the blaster does have some spread, so past medium ranges it's going to struggle, but even at those far medium ranges it's still going to only deal half of the up-close point-blank damage, which is pretty reasonable. The ability has an active time of 25 seconds, but that is if you were to activate the ability and not actually fire the blaster, which isn't something I would particularly recommend. While firing the active time goes down much faster, so if you were to activate the ability and fire non-stop, you would get 8 full seconds of firing time before needing to go into the E11's 15-second cooldown. Leia's E11 can drop most heroes in about 1 second if she lands only headshots without being interrupted, which obviously is unlikely to happen online unless someone is just AFK, but just wanted to point that out unless someone thinks 8 seconds is too short of an active time. With that said, Leia's E11 can be improved substantially via these little things called star cards, so now is as good of a time as ever to talk about those. Leia is the rare hero that, for me at least, has a standout best setup that I only rarely change. I will talk about a few other cards after I give you my primary loadout, but in my opinion the 3 cards I'm about to talk about are her best loadout in 99% of situations. The first card that should be a part of every Leia loadout all the time is Relentless Firing, and this card increases the active firing time of the E11. It won't increase the amount of time you can run around it without firing, that will stay at 25 seconds, but it increases the amount of time you can fire the weapon from 8 seconds to almost 13, which is huge, a 55% increase. The second card I pretty much always run, and this card pairs perfectly with the first, is Rebel Heart, and this card gives Leia a very helpful 25% damage reduction while her E11 is active. 25% damage reduction is huge for an ability that you can possibly run around with for up to 25 seconds, and because her E11 has a relatively quick 15-second cooldown, you end up having that damage reduction much of the time. These two cards together are essential in my opinion. I run them in all game modes, but in HVV and Hero Showdown especially, you have to be running them. If you are not running these two in hero modes, you are not running the right setup. Leia does not have better cards than these two, and they pair together perfectly, as I mentioned. I think the third card slot is where people tend to shake things up a bit, but in my opinion at least, High Spirit is still her best card for slot number 3. This increases the amount of health you can regenerate without needing her shield from 200 to 300. To me, this card is still completely worth it. An extra 100 HP of rapid health regeneration that you don't have to rely on backing off and using your shield for soul regeneration for is so nice. In large-scale game modes, this keeps me in the fight as I can rapidly regenerate nearly half my health whenever I need to, and in HVV it's even more important, as you usually won't be given those chances to sit back and regen to full in your shield, unless you're just completely hiding and being no use to your teammates. If I were you, I would be running Rebel Heart, Relentless Firing, and High Spirit in all but one situation. The only time I recommend swapping any of those cards out is if you plan on using your secondary fire a lot. I am probably just going to use an old clip to show what I'm talking about, because I really don't like doing this, but in the case you are going to be picking off people with your secondary fire, you would be silly not to run Laser Brain, which increases Leia's secondary fire damage by 35, making it a one-hit kill on 3 of the 4 infantry classes. I don't particularly recommend playing like this, but hey, it's a game and you can do whatever you want, so if you will be using your secondary fire, Laser Brain is a necessity, and I would recommend swapping out High Spirit, as you won't need that rapid health regeneration if you're sitting back safely in the back of a map. As far as strategy goes, let's start out with hero modes. Leia is still a hero that needs support from her team if you want to maximize her potential. She is excellent in a 1v1 when you can focus on timing your rolls and landing headshots, but if your team is of the variety that just refuses to work together, runs in by themselves over and over again, and leaves you by yourself, you are not going to have a fun time with Leia unless the enemy team is completely incompetent. Leia doesn't have knockdown abilities like Han to buy herself time, and she doesn't have a stun like Chewie or Lando either. I'm sure we have all had the struggle of playing with HVV teams that are just frustrating, and they keep running in by themselves and dying over and over again. With that kind of team, you are going to get frustrated with Leia if the other team is made up of good players. However, with teammates that will just exist near you, they don't really even have to be great, they just have to at least understand that you should be near your teammates, Leia will dominate. Her grenades have insane damage potential when thrown near enemies distracted by teammates, and her E11 can shred someone in the middle of a duel so fast I almost feel bad at times. She also does really well in a 1v1 against pretty much anyone, but especially against other blaster heroes. Bosk, BB9E, and Iden are all kind of a joke against Leia, and if you catch Boba off guard, you can melt him before he has a chance to go anywhere, although a good Boba at range using his jetpack can be a bit of a problem for Leia. Phasma can be tricky when she's camping on her droid, which Leia has little defense against by herself, so I would recommend trying your best to avoid a 1v1 with a good Phasma. Of the Force users, Palpatine goes down hilariously fast, Maul is usually pretty easy as his damage output is pretty low, and all 3 of Maul's abilities make him vulnerable to an E11 to the face. Grievous is also usually pretty easy to take down in a 1v1, his stamina is so low you can shred through it and easily take him out with your E11. Leia's biggest weaknesses in a 1v1 are without question Vader, who is just a counter to everyone, he really has nothing that works against him, and Dooku, who has enough stamina to block what he needs to from you, but if you let him get the jump on you, he will end you before you even realize what happened. And unlike most light side blaster heroes, Leia doesn't have anything to slow down Dooku once he's coming for you. Han can knock him down twice, and almost everyone else has a stun. If you are using Leia and need to deal with a Dooku, you really just have to keep tabs on him at all times. Leia is definitely a hero that needs to be used in the right situation in HVV. She's usually a great pick, but with a poor team working against a coordinated team, she is more vulnerable than most others on the light side. She's a glass cannon that doesn't have a temporary get-out-of-jail-free card like most of the other blaster heroes. In large-scale game modes like Galactic Assault and Supremacy, Leia is arguably even better than in hero modes, or at least, there are very few situations where I feel Leia isn't well suited for, as she is almost always going to have at least a few teammates near her. Her squad shield makes her an incredibly strong presence on any objective, and she's pretty great at being aggressive too. Really, Leia's biggest weaknesses, at least in large-scale game modes, is once she's been hit with anything that will knock her down, she has nothing to bail her out. If she's pulled, choked, thrown, whatever, which she has no protection against, she is vulnerable for a very long time, and she can't throw a stun down to create some distance between herself and her attacker to recover. If you are going to venture out by yourself as Leia, and non-cooperative teammates will force you to do that from time to time, watch the minimap and avoid heroes who can take you off your feet if they're near teammates, because Leia can get melted in seconds if you do mess up and let a Force user ragdoll you near enemies with blasters. As for what maps she should be avoided on, there really aren't any if I'm being honest. She is one of very few hero options who can excel at extreme long ranges, and at anything from point blank to medium ranges she is still great. Her only range struggle comes in at like those medium to long ranges, like right in the middle, where her secondary fire isn't going to lock on very well, and her E11 and pistol are both pretty inaccurate as they do have some spread, but for the most part those situations can be completely avoided if you know where to position yourself. As a complete package, I really like what DICE did with Leia. They took a hero that has pretty much been completely neglected for nearly 2 years, and brought her to a place where she's at least on par with the other top tier blaster heroes, and is well worth using nowadays. Anyway, that is going to do it for today's hero guide. If you enjoyed it and would like to see more of these more often, let me know by leaving a thumbs up. And if there's a specific hero you'd like to see updated ASAP, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you all so much for watching. If you are new around here, feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. I'm solo.